Now, the last 2 weeks have been awash with news about one man versus the government. The self-proclaimed general of the national resistance movement, Miguna Miguna, sparked a drama after he landed at JKI on Monday last week and refused to hand in his Canadian passport to facilitate his entry into the country. What followed was a protracted altercation between him, police and immigration officers that culminated into another deportation of Miguna to Dubai before he finally travelled to Canada. Media coverage of the drama surrounding Miguna had become a point of concern, with some critics saying Miguna's tirades were fueled by the media. But Miguna is also on record attacking the media and accusing the Fourth Estate of being used by government to report half-truths about his run-ins with authorities. On the newsroom today, we go behind the scenes of the coverage of this Miguna drama. In studio, I have journalist to my extreme left, Patrick Gadara, and next to him is David Omayo from the Media Council of Kenya, and next to me here to my immediate left is Professor Levi Obonyo, a lecturer at Daystar University, the Dean of the School of Communication. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for making time to come in. I'll just start by asking you, were you satisfied with how the media reported this whole Miguna issue? I'll start with you, Patrick.
I think they reported the drama fine, as in that's always been a strength with our media.
Yes.
They always look for the drama. But I'm not sure that they very well articulated the issues behind it. I think that lots of Kenyans are lost about the legal issues that have been raised and the actual status that is there at the moment. So, for example, the fact that Miguna's, the order suspending Miguna's passport had itself been suspended by the courts, which then means that Miguna was to be presumed a citizen until his court case is settled. Didn't seem to make it into the news. I think that there was quite a lot, and even in the discussions surrounding the entire thing, I feel like most of it privileged what was happening at the airport at the expense of the issues that the courts were actually dealing with. I'll give another example. Lots of our newspapers are still referring to Miguna's NRM, the National Resistance Movement, as a proscribed organization. Yet the court order suspended the order to, the declaration by government that was an illegal organization, which means it is still legal. It is not a proscribed organization.
All right.
So I think media really does tend to focus on the show, on the conflict, rather than on the issues that are driving it.
All right, David, do you think the media covered this issue right?
Yes and no. In the circumstances, I would say they tried their best. While they refused to delve deeper into the issues. So like what we saw for, I think, 2 full days was about he said, she said, he has done, she has replied, and all that. Nobody went deeper to say, now, by saying this is what the law means around that and all that. And it is something that is emerging, especially over the past few years, what we call shallow desk journalism, where it's just about reporting what happened, and that inability to present the facts and let now then the consumers of the news be able to digest and isolate the issues and all that, such that even now, after Miguna has been deported, certain issues are now emerging slowly that the media was unable to raise at that time, such that while we had the drama at the airport, for example, we did not invest in people researching how he departed, what documented used to board and all that. All these are issues coming 1 week later. So that concentration around the drama, the events, what was happening, and nobody trying to get real facts so that then Kenyans can be served with the facts that they are and now be left to judge by themselves. I think our media did not invest in that. And it's becoming a very common feature where a complex issue emerges and the media brushes over it, just throws in 1, 2 photos here and a comment here and there, and fails to engage in deep research and analysis so that the viewers or consumers can be presented with issues that they can then now digest and come to a conclusion on their own.
All right, Prof.
It's interesting, maybe let's focus a bit on the drama. And I've been very interested in the visual coverage of the issue. And it's been interesting watching the beginning of the show, if I would put it that way, to borrow from Gadara's term of the drama.
Yeah.
And you have Miguna getting out of the aircraft, punching in the air. Picture this almost as a theater. And so there are two, the protagonist and the antagonist. And then you begin to see Miguna being covered, the visuals as the struggle gets on at the airport, the visuals as he's dragged back. I mean, remember that confrontation with the police or with the plainclothes officials?
Yeah.
And then eventually Miguna in the toilet, and eventually Miguna in a stretcher. And you're beginning to think of, in this theater where you have the protagonist and the antagonist, who is the other side? The government, so to speak. And so you have, what's the imagery that represents the other side? Yeah. And you have guns, people showing up by the airport carrying guns, carrying batons, pushing and pushing. And so you have one man against this force, which most of the time is actually silent, doesn't speak. And this one man who is on this other side is actually speaking. And at the end of it, you have somebody, the image that eventually emerges is a man who's been beaten to a pulp, lying on a stretcher. And thinking about that coverage without thinking about going to the details, and I think the details are important, as my colleagues are saying, but just what did we see from the visuals? And how powerful have these visuals been in terms of depicting this confrontation that we've had, this drama that we've had? And how does it contribute in terms of the overall image that we're having? And I think if it's helpful to go into the details. And I think it's also useful that in terms of the presentation, the other side, when you have this one side, the protagonist and the antagonist, that would have been helpful to be able to try to balance that in terms of providing the kind of visuals that would package this other side. The image that eventually emerges is not a very pretty one.
So you do not think the media covered it well?
The media worked with what it had. When you begin to look at, particularly looking at it from the visuals, you have all these visuals being there, and the media is presenting it. Okay. And as the media is presenting it, this is the image that you have, this is the image that you have. Right. And just visually, what else could the media do that would help present an image that speaks? Because at the end of the day, you begin to think of it from where we stand as a country, that would help present the country in a much better light.
Hold that thought, because we're going to get to that. But first, I want us to take a look at this. The coverage on the arrival of NRM self-proclaimed General Miguna Miguna rejuvenated the discussion on media freedom and the horrible assaults on journalists, now receiving both local and international condemnation. And as KTN News' Francis Otomo now reports, the Media Council of Kenya has also condemned the harassment.
Oh, do not push him, sir! You are live on KTN News.
Yes, and this is the arrival of the self-proclaimed NRM General Miguna Miguna was certainly bound to ruffle feathers within some state circles. And for many media houses, this was an absolute top story. At Kenya's pioneer 24-hour news channel KTN News, experienced reporter Sophia Wanuna was picked on the beat together with senior cameraman Kirera Magana. And as they prepared to set out, it turned out this was going to be an assignment of a kind.
So they don't want to be filmed, and of course they're saying, shut that down. So they start pushing us back. I mean, like, when you're on air, of course, you don't immediately stop. That's not normal coverage. You continue to speak, of course, as you obey their orders. But the unfortunate part is they kept pushing us back and using force. And that is where initially our colleague from Citizen, Leto, was clobbered.
The horrible experience at the hand of the men in blue, ultimately stealing the thunder even from the main subject of the day. Some journalists were badly hurt during the coverage as crucial production equipment was destroyed. This was chilling, but these journalists stood up to the police with a bold face.
We are the eyes and ears of Kenyans. Kenyans are not at the JKIA watching and witnessing all these events, so they get to see what's happening. These are national interest matter, so that when we are barred from covering it, it is Kenyans being hindered that opportunity to witness the same.
Mbona tunaambiwa tusipige picha tena? Kwa nini tusipige picha? Na tulikuwa tumealikwa hapo, tumefanya kutoka asubuhi mpaka hiyo masaa. Kazi lazima itafanyika.
Perhaps the biggest casualty of the nightfall horror was Citizen TV's political affairs reporter Stephen Leto, and Robert Gishira of NTV. Leto was clobbered and had to abandon his work altogether and was rushed to Nairobi Hospital for treatment. KTN News traced him at his home where he's still recuperating, and although physically weakened by the ordeal, his musings tell of a journalist still not yet done.
What happened to us as journalists, and to me particularly last night, was uncalled for. It was really, something that was backward, and you can only feel that the gains that the media had made have started, being, eroded.
In Kenya, although media freedom and access to information is guaranteed in Articles 34 and 35 of the Constitution, the country is doing abysmally, ranking among countries whose media freedom status is largely violated. In a global index report, the Economist Intelligence Unit, Central African Republic, and Lebanon.
What happened at the airport yesterday is regrettable, and those responsible should be punished.
Vikosi vyetu vya usalama viwe vinatumiwa vibaya kuwagandamiza watu, hasa wanahabari. Hiyo ni jambo la kusikitisha sana.
Hata kama wanafanya kazi ni kuzingatia, na hata sisi tupo kazini, na si kuona maana ya wao kudhalilishwa hata kufikia kuchapwa.
Early February, Interior Cabinet Secretary Fred Matiang'i ordered the closure of 3 TV stations, NTV, Citizen TV, and KTN News, in connection to the controversial swearing in of NASA leader Raila Odinga. The state branded the media as conspirators to the ceremony.
Over the years, reporting in conflict zones has left journalists treading a fine line between safety and freedom of the speech. And it's no doubt that events of yesterday have left Kenya perusing the ugly pages of media violation. Francis Ontomwa, KTN News, Nairobi.
All right, David, you are the CEO of the Media Council. You condemned that harassment. But of course, as we had earlier discussed, and you mentioned that we would have done things differently as the media. If you are in that position, what could you have done?
Of course, number one is that the media was right to stand their ground. Yeah. What we are having is a crisis of a total breakdown of communication between government and the media. And we have seen that in the past few months. Shut down, police bill, global journalists. This is not the first time. I think we've seen a lot of that.
Yeah.
And I think it's something that we need to move to arrest right now, because it's very natural that in security situations, police will naturally give orders and they're supposed to be followed. But it's not just waking up suddenly and telling people, just pack and go. So we'll need to get a working relationship between the police and the media. And I think broader government, because when you suddenly tell guys pack and go without explanation, without rules of engagement around issues, then you create unnecessary conflicts and all that. So without narrowing down to the media in this case, you have to appreciate that the police also clobbered the lawyers who were there. And there were 1 or 2 human rights guys sent by the National Commission on Human Rights who were also chased away, tear gas and chased away. Yeah. So we have really, I think we need to engage about how the different agencies, in this case the media, will engage with the government security agents. Which areas, how do you cover and all that. I've seen a few people saying that was a security installation and all that. Yes, it's a security installation at the service of Kenyans. It's not something that is exclusive to some foreigners or aliens. It is there to serve Kenyans. So if we have Kenyans there and Kenyan media, it's always supposed to be at the service of Kenyans. So that total inability for the media and government, in this very broad sense, to communicate and relate is very bad, and unless we arrest it, we're trying to do 1 or 2 things, it's bound to get worse, because I do not see us getting better unless we find a way of relating such that everybody respects their lanes.
All right. Yes. Patrick, you're a journalist, yeah? Does media freedom really exist at this day and age, at this point?
Well, I think media freedom is always a contested thing. Government is always trying to shut down media, across the world. And it's actually up to the media to stand up for itself. And I think if you look at our recent history, our media hasn't done a good job of really standing up for itself. I think for a long time it has coddled government. It has acted as if government was to be its friend. You remember during the elections, they colluded with government to run illegal ads, for example, and pocketed quite a lot of money for which they've never actually accounted. I think that there's a tendency which I think is understandable among Kenyans to think that the media made its bed and is now being forced to lie in it. I think that we really need to put that aside and to stand up for the principle, you know. And the principle is that the media should be free to cover the events because, as Wanuna says, it is us who are being denied the information as citizens. You know. And I also think that we have to be careful about how we frame this. I disagree a bit with David about the idea that this is a communications breakdown. It is not. This is government flagrantly violating law. You know, it's the government essentially undermining our constitution and the guarantees for access to information that are contained therein. And we need to stand up for that, you know, and to insist that the media has to be given access to these places. It's not the first time it's happened. You remember when Raila came back from the US and suddenly it was declared, you know, a security zone, you know, nobody can go there and cover it, etc. You know, and I think it has been a trend throughout that the government has, when it suits it, it can allow coverage. When it doesn't, it thinks it can shut it down. I think we need to stand up to this. I think the media has to be seen and it has to disentangle itself from its perceived alliances with government to actually stand up for principle, whether or not it suits them. You know, it can't be the case that you'll complain when you're beaten at the airport. But when you're offered these ads, the PDU ads, you will take them. Okay. You know, it can't be that way. You either stand for principle or you stand for nothing.
So then, does this, you know, affect how we reported that story? Because you're saying there are issues there you're raising. Does this affect it, Prof? That this really affected how we actually reported that story?
For a start, I don't know why in this age of time the government agencies still feel that their response to situation should be with rungus and beating up people.
Right.
The physicality that attended that situation, I think, is worrying, whether it is journalist or not journalist. I mean, the fact that you respond with, breaking limbs, as it were, guys going to hospital because of this. I think we have to win ourselves as a society of that mentality that you have to get physical. And I think we can't preach let's not get physical, domestic violence, etc., and yet in public arena where we get the chance, the agencies that represent the government come across as being very violent. And unfortunately, there is no rebuttal. These individuals are not told that's not the way to respond to issues. And then coming to journalists, I think the space for journalists to operate should be protected, in protecting the sense that give them the space to do what they need to do. I think that's what our laws require us to do, that freedom to be able to freely go about the duties, the responsibilities that we are doing. The journalists are at the airport to cover the story, and so they should actually get the space to be able to cover that. And in any case, the government, I think, should be aiding that process by providing that space within which these people are operating. And so with regard to just how that scene was, that scene played out, it's just not the image that I think that we should be putting forward in this age and time. We have the full range of the media representation, but in this case, not just the media representation, basically getting that everybody else is being subjected to that treatment.
All right. So we want to take a short break here on Morning Express, the newsroom, but when we come back, we want to find out, one, how else should have the media covered this issue? Were we sufficient or, critic enough? Did we